Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you guys for joining us. We are ready to get started. I'll just let everybody know right up front, Mark McNamara, my co-presenter, really the person who put together our entire series on RevOps, just unexpectedly out sick today. So he's not going to be able to make it, but that's okay. I got the slide deck. I know enough to be dangerous, and we'll go through the content today. And I was hoping to maybe get a little more hands-on and practical, just because I have the opportunity. Let me real quick, before we dive into the slides, I am going to grab a link here and I'm putting a link in the chat in the meeting. So definitely want to keep this interactive. You are welcome to type your comments and questions and things into the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that. But you can also come on stage so that we can hear you directly. You can ask questions, etc. Feel free. I think, like I said earlier, I'm going to try to cover the content that Mark put together from my not quite as expert point of view as Mark, and then we'll hopefully have some time at the end for a little more Q&A. So, and then also one thing to let you know about at the end, I got something I'm going to share with you that I think you're really going to like. It's a great way for you to get an assessment of where you are and your team is with regards to, your RevOps system. So let me turn on my screen here and we'll get going. Okay, you should be seeing that slideshow now. And again, just to remind everybody, type your comments and questions into the chat or click the link that's there in the chat, and that'll bring you on stage so that you can ask questions directly. Okay, well, so the title of today's talk is RevOps isn't a team, it's a system. And I think that it kind of says it all. It's just a mindset that, when I started in sales, if somebody said RevOps, what are you even talking about, right? When sales enablement, RevOps started to become a topic, at least in my world, was relatively recently. And, you kind of, by default, you kind of just think of it as your team, right? And I think Mark's point here is that's the wrong way to think about it. We're going to dig into why that is. This one, we've all lived here, right? What are we going to sell next month? What are we going to sell next quarter? How do you answer that question? If you're the VP of sales or the business owner, you get used to, using a lot of gut instinct and so on and so forth. You try to put sales enablement systems and reporting systems and RevOps systems in place to give you more of a methodical, systematic, analytical way of predicting revenue and seeing opportunities and challenges coming early, right? But it still happens, right? We miss our forecast. Sometimes you miss it in a good way, meaning you exceed it, right? But you didn't know it. It's a surprise. The worst kind of surprise is when you don't get to your goal. And then you ask the team, what's going wrong here? And you get, 10 different opinions, right? Everybody's got their own way of looking at it. There's no objective truth for you to use as an organization. Obviously, that's a problem. So, like I mentioned earlier, my mindset has traditionally been RevOps is a team of people, in a large sales organization where you might have, 50, 100 salespeople running around the country doing their thing. You had a team back in the office that kind of just made everything work for the salespeople. Your team's goal is to keep things moving smoothly for the sales team, right? Help them be as effective and efficient as they can be, right? But and the things they were doing, those people would be doing is, managing the CRM and creating reports for management, pipeline reporting, doing forecasting reportings, and that kind of thing, right? Which is all great, especially in a world 10 years ago where, salespeople were going to look at you when you asked them to do their own pipeline report like you're crazy, right? Like, I don't know how to operate that software, but the world's changed a little bit. In today's RevOps, it's more of an operating system, right? Sure, it's the people. There's some people involved. But as much as anything, it's a process. A process that's repeatable. That's, to me, the key. So that it runs on autopilot. So, and then, of course, you got to have, the more data you have, the more consistent the data is, the more comprehensive the data is, the better. And you have to have the technology that makes using all of that data and process easy. It can't be work to the team, especially not your salespeople. So, the problem that we have generally in most organizations is, you got your CRM and you got your marketing system and you got your finance tools. And then there's a whole other set of sales enablement tools, right? And they're all kind of different things. And yeah, maybe they talk to each other a little bit. Maybe even in some cases, you're buying them from the same vendor, so they're kind of under the same roof, but they're still two different systems. And there's some integration issues and things like that. It's work just to keep it all going, right? And that's where that RevOps team spends a lot of their time. The problem to me is that all these systems have to work just right to get the result that you want out of them. And keeping them working just right is kind of a full-time job for at least one or two people on your team. And, nobody's got the time to sit around monkeying with sales tools. You want them in front of customers selling. So what that means is your system doesn't get enough attention. It doesn't get built in a kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? A real stable, resilient sort of way. And then it just breaks unexpectedly. And now you don't have the analytics or the automation that you are counting on. And that directly impacts revenue, maybe even today, this quarter, this month. And now people are scrambling around, fixing things, and you're not being proactive, right? That's just the real world. So here's the symptoms, right? Forecast surprises, like we talked about earlier. Pipeline inflation. That's a great term. But basically what we mean there is you're just filling your pipeline with deals that may or may not be real. There's deals that never go away. The customer sat for the demo and the executives all kind of gave you it looks really good. And they told you they were going to talk about it and make decisions and things like that. And they just never do. Right. But unfortunately, because we're salespeople and we're all optimistic, we never want to take that back out of the pipeline. Right. Long ramp times, meaning new sales hires come on and it takes them forever to get up to speed. Inconsistent execution. You got one guy doing it one way and another guy doing it a different way. And, that's directly related to long ramp times, right? And cross-team blame, right? Marketing's blaming the salespeople. Hey, I'm getting them all kinds of leads. They're just not closing them. The salespeople say the leads suck, right? That's the real world. You can automate a lot of this by just putting together a system that's not so dependent on people. So we're going from a reporting system to an operating model, kind of an operating system, right? The old version of RevOps reports on activity and tracks the pipeline and aggregates data together and manipulates it and is reactive. The modern RevOps team is guiding behavior. Here's what you should do next. Improving execution, connecting systems, and being proactive. We're going to get into a little more of what that really means. So the RevOps maturity curve. Level 1, you're reporting on things, right? You have just, back when I was in a VP of sales role for the first time, managing a good sized team, it was a real breakthrough. This is like 20 years ago, but it was a real breakthrough to be able to run a report of all the salespeople's pipeline for the month, for the quarter, whatever. And, just have it all in one place and look at it and talk about it. Some of us are still stuck there, right? Level 2 is process alignment. We have some defined stages in that pipeline, and we have some rules around what goes in what stage. You can't move to stage 3 if you don't meet these criteria, those types of things. Level 3 is insight driven. So you're looking ahead, you're using the data and the signals to give you insight into the future, right? And then level 4 is an execution engine. So that the system is using those signals of what's coming in the future to guide your salespeople and your marketing teams execution and automate a lot of things as well. So, as we've talked about here, most teams are not all the way there, right? Your dashboards just, more reports and more dashboards are not going to get you where you need to go. The one thing that hasn't changed in my entire career in sales is that more face time with customers for your sales team is the holy grail, right? If you can maximize the amount of time they are spending with qualified customers, building relationships, good things will happen. You will get more intelligence about what's happening in the marketplace. You will have stronger relationships with customers, obviously, and that leads to revenue. There'll be new opportunities uncovered. So your average deal size goes up, all of those things, right? So in a way, we can look at all of these things, these mechanics that we're talking about today, as a way to drive that result, right? Either we're getting better at getting our salespeople in front of the right customers, right? Sometimes that's the problem, is we're spending too much time with unqualified leads. Or we're taking busy work and indecision out of the salesperson's life, so they're more focused on spending time in front of customers. So, when we get all the way there to level 4, this is, for most of us, including me, this is an aspiration. It's a goal. It's something we're going to work towards. Maybe we'll never get there, but the closer we get, the better we get, right? Your CRM is guiding the next steps. In other words, I just logged a call with a customer and the CRM's telling me what to do next. It's not leaving it up to me, right? In other words, you're enforcing your process on your sales team without making it a burden on the sales team, right? Content in context, meaning, sure, the marketing team gave me this binder full of brochures and product information, and I spent, a week in training with the product team, and, I got all this information in my head about our products. And I got all these assets that I can share with customers about the products. But I'm a sales guy, and to me, I'm a sales guy. Every customer seems like a great customer, somebody I'm going to close tomorrow. I'm internally optimistic, right? So if you just give me all of that stuff, I'm just going to be sharing it with everybody, right? And that's not the best thing for the customer, right? The customer needs breadcrumbs, right? They need to be led along a path of education for themselves, right? So the content that you're producing for your team to use needs to show up in their face based on the context of that particular deal. This customer just brought up this challenge. Aha, here's the piece to give them for that, right? That's to be very, very selective and timely. Managers coach on signals, so manage behavior, not results. That's a different way to say that. But I think more subtly, what we're saying here is we're looking at the signals the customer is giving us, not just the behavior of the salesperson, right? So to me, in a B2B sense, one of the greatest reasons or most common reasons that a deal kind of goes into that drift stage where it doesn't go away, but it never closes, is that we're just not talking to all the right people at the organization, right? The one person that we have a relationship that seems very excited about it just doesn't have the full authority to make the decision. And the other folks involved, we've never talked to, and they have other priorities, and we're just not aware of it, right? That's a signal when your champion won't introduce you to the other influencers. That's a pretty strong signal that in most sales organizations that I've been involved in, either, directly involved in, or even with our customers here at Sales Nexus, you just kind of ignore that, again, it goes back to that optimism. We want to believe, right? That's why we need to base these decisions on data, objective data. Behavior-based forecasts, right? So it's not, hey, this customer over here is currently spending $50,000 a month on, our competitor's product. So I'm going to get them closed next quarter, and that's going to be $50,000 a month in my pipeline. Okay, great. But what have you done to lead us towards that deal, right? The pipeline should not be reflecting $50,000 a month if you've only just had an initial phone call with one person there, Okay. So what's the system of the future, the system that we're working towards here look like? Well, obviously your CRM is where the customer information goes, the deals and the activities. But there's a lot of other components. The LMS, Learning Management System. So this is where in a lot of medium-sized or smaller organizations, if you're lucky, you're doing, you're sending your salespeople to some, like a Sandler President's Club type training thing, right? Where they're getting trained sales practices and principles, but it's not sales training in the context of your business or your customers, right? in a larger organization that's, getting close to this level 4 that we're talking about, they're going to have a learning management system so that when you're onboarding a team or onboarding a salesperson, there's a structured set of lessons for them to go through, right? And only after they've cleared all those lessons and successfully taken the quizzes or whatever, do they get to go on to the next step in their training or whatever. That's great. But we're going to talk here in a few minutes about how we can take that to the next level. There's the content and the messaging. Are you letting your salespeople write all the emails describing your products to their customers? If so, then you're by nature, you are getting very inconsistent communication with your customer, right? That's one of those details that, back to what we were talking about before, you're looking at your pipeline, you're looking at, kind of the close rate on an individual sales rep basis. How do you even surface the fact that this one guy keeps losing these big deals at the last minute, the emails he's sending about the product just kind of suck? How do you even see that? Most teams, they're just never going to get that deep, right? You have to have a way to standardize the communications, the content. So the path of least resistance for the salesperson is to send the best stuff that your team has put together, right? And then there's the AI layer. We could spend 30 minutes on that topic, but try not to go all the way down that rabbit hole today. It's important, and it's not just a research tool, right? That's what I see today. Most sales teams are trying to do. They're using it at the top of the funnel to, get information about a customer. And then they're using it to automate messaging, right? But there's a whole other realm that most teams aren't really thinking about. And that is, how can we use AI to look at our own process and make it better, right? It's not hard to do. And hopefully we'll have time here in a little bit to look at that more specifically. So the problem with today's tech stack is, you got your CRM and it's tracking how many meetings you had and those kinds of things, how many calls you made. Your LMS is tracking whether you watch the training video. In a lot of cases, you're not even getting management. The sales management is not even getting feedback as to whether they really absorbed or mastered the material. It just, yes, they completed it. Okay, that means he sat there with his phone watching a YouTube video while the training video played. How do you know? CMS stores content, but doesn't surface it when and where it's needed. Customer sends an email saying, hey, I'm confused because you have this one product that does this, you have this other product that does that, but it seems like they both would work for my application. What are the trade-offs, right? There's no reason that your system cannot detect that is a question that requires this particular piece, where your marketing team put together a nice comparison of the pros and cons of each product line, right? And that, AI might be part of doing that. The way a lot of salespeople are using AI is it's just a chat bot in a tab on your computer, right? And you can go ask it a question when you want to. That's fine. But it's not really in the process. The way that we've always built Sales Nexus is we don't want distractions for the salesperson, right? We want them to, have their cup of coffee, sit down, boot up the system. Here's the people I got to call today. And here's why I'm calling each one of them. Everything I need to know about their current relationship, so I can just go, right? Call, log what's happening. And then the system helps me, easily take follow-up actions and things like that without jumping around from one screen to another, right? Like in a lot of systems, I'm doing that in my CRM, but then the customer says, well, yeah, I'd like to see that, your spec sheet on this or your, whatever material. And you got to go now over to your content management system or your marketing automation system and make sure that they get added to the list to get this piece or whatever. And then maybe you want me to go over to the chat bot and do a research on that company before I call them and all that. I got too many windows. And as a salesperson, I'm not gonna be very focused. It just needs to be simple. Tell me what to do. Tell me who I'm calling, why I'm calling, and let me follow up so that I can then move on to the next person, right? Because that's where it all starts. If I'm depending on calling people as part of my process, we all know that's where things break most often. You just don't get enough calls made. And all these distractions are not helping that at all. Okay. So, what does good data flow look like? It's detecting risk, right? It's seeing things like we have this big deal that's been moving through the pipeline very nicely. And there was a lot of dialogue going on with the customer that we could see, calls getting logged, email exchanges, and so on and so forth. And here it is now in the, proposal or negotiation or closing stage. And we haven't heard from them in a week and a half. That's not a good sign, right? That the system should be alerting management and the sales rep to, hey, we need to do something here, right? It's triggering coaching, right? So I can see on a daily basis, even an hourly basis, Sam over here, that guy makes his calls all day, every day, right? He's exceeding our expectations for number of calls made, right? And then I got Susie over here. It doesn't matter what I do. She's never going to make enough calls, right? She's always lagging. But on the other hand, Sam, even though he's making all those calls, he just kind of doesn't get that many appointments, right? Susie makes far fewer calls, but she gets a lot of appointments. Those two people need totally different training. To take them both on a Friday and put them in front of the same trainer or the same video or whatever, it's just foolishness. You're just going to aggravate them. Sam needs some coaching on, what he's saying on those calls, right? Susie needs some coaching on just cranking up the volume, right? And your system should identify those opportunities and provide the salesperson, ideally, with the right training and content, in real time. There's no reason it can't be daily, just a quick little 10 minutes at the end of the day. Hey, based on what happened today, here's a little video you might want to watch. Surfacing content, we've kind of touched on this a few times. We're finding the right piece of material, videos, PDFs, spec sheets, buyer guides, pricing lists. Sometimes can be a very mundane thing, but it's the right thing at the right time for that customer. And then suggesting action for the sales rep, right? Based on what we have, based on what we C has happened with this customer today and in the past. The right next thing is this. Here's everything you need to do it. Click go, right? It should be that easy. Data should guide behavior, not just describe history, right? We're looking for a dashboard, like in a car, not the dashboard that, you get from Salesforce, right? It's not just, here's what happened yesterday. It's, here's the early warning signs that help me determine what's going to happen tomorrow, right? It's maybe, if I'm sticking with the car analogy, there's a difference between the speedometer or the odometer, right? The odometer tells me how many miles I've been, right? How far I've been. That's important to know, but it's not helping me know anything about the future, right? The oil pressure and the water temperature, those are things that tell me something about the future, right? They're not as sexy, really, as the speedometer or the odometer. It's fun to go fast and it's fun to go far. It's not fun to think about what might be going wrong with my car if my oil pressure's too high, right? But if I ignore that, I'm going to have a problem. I'm not going to get very far and I'm not going to be going fast, right? So that's what we're looking for. We need to find the data in your business that tells you, is your machine operating at peak performance? And where are you headed, right? Okay, so we got vanity metrics and real metrics. Like I just talked about, right? How many calls did I make? How many new deals did we open up this month? What I think is a big part of the problem here is, especially in a larger organization, but even in a smaller one, the upper management does not always anyway come from a sales background, right? And so they can be dazzled with metrics very easily. They just kind of don't know what matters. And they don't know how squishy some of these numbers can be, right? So like, calls made. Hey, boss, as the VP of sales, I can walk into my CEO and put a report on his desk and say, look at this, boss. We went from making an average of 10 calls a day last month to 20 calls a day this month. Hey, who doesn't feel good about that, right? But anybody that's been in sales very long, that doesn't really mean that much if you don't dig a little bit deeper, right? So what are real metrics? Content views, right? Like, if we're doing a great job of everything that we've talked about and we're sending the right content to the right customer at the right time, then those customers should be valuing that content. We should be seeing them consuming it, watching the whole video, not just getting an email and hitting delete, right? Downloading the white paper, coming back to us after looking at the content with follow-up questions. Hey, I looked at this and I have a few questions, right? Those are all the signals that the content's working. Training completion, certifications earned, right? Those are, like we talked about earlier, kind of depends on the quiz, right? I may have gone through it, but it doesn't mean that I really onboarded the lessons. It's once I get out into the field that I have to execute on what I learned. And it's there that we have to measure their behavior to see, are they changing their pattern, right? So you've got to have a system that's giving you those early warning signals. Honestly, my thinking at this moment in time is you kind of have to have both, right? Not only does your CEO just kind of want to see the vanity metrics, but he's then got, a board or, mentors or bankers or whatever that he's got to report these things to. And at some level, they just have to give that person what they're asking for, right? If, in some case, you can't bring your banker a report about, how many of your customers told you some mundane specification detail, right? But you've determined in your process that that's the real key. If they're using this particular type of material or whatever, that, man, you got a high rate of success with that customer. You can't bring that to the banker, right? So you're going to have to do the vanity metrics and have those reports, but you also have to have a discipline as a team to keep your eye on those, how's the motor running kind of metrics as well. Yeah. So, some metrics that we can kind of try to focus in on: stage conversion rates, right? Like, how fast do I go from this stage to that stage in my deal pipeline? Or which of those stages do people tend to stall at, right? That's actionable information, right? If we're going from one stage to the next, if we're going from stage 1 to stage 2 very quickly, but then we always stall in stage 2, we stay there way too long. Well, what we know is we need to keep them in stage 1 for a little longer, right? Do a better job of qualifying and so on and so forth, right? Deal velocity, kind of the same thing. Time in stage, rep consistency. For me, it's always one of the key ingredients has always been data capture. So in a CRM company, what that looks like is I give my sales team fields to fill out about their customers. That's the way we've always thought about it is, there's certain things you want your salespeople to ask every customer, right? Like we talked about a minute ago. It's that one little part, which model are you using, right? Because our machine works better with that model or whatever, right? It's those little details. And what you want to do is you want to give your salespeople an easy way, like I've talked about earlier. They got that one screen, they're on the phone with the customer, and they can just see at a glance of the key questions that we know we need to ask our customers. Here's 5 of them that I still don't have an answer to. So I got to find a way in this conversation to get some time and direct the attention over to those questions, right? It's a really powerful tool. Number one, it's a great way to but vastly improve problems with, qualification and deals kind of stalling. But it's also a way to analyze the rep behavior, right? You can see easily these sales reps are consistently getting all of that information. And these other reps over here either aren't getting it or they're not putting it in the system. And you can analyze their success rates and how that changes things. What I would bet is The guys that get all the information right up front put fewer deals in the pipeline, right? Because they're disqualifying them early. But the deals that they put in there have a higher close rate and they go faster, right? Depending on how you're reporting, if you're looking at those vanity metrics, you might actually be rewarding the guys that are doing it wrong because it looks better, right? In the reports that you're looking at, it looks better because they got a lot more deals in there, right? So this is definitely a journey. It's not a destination, right? Because those little things are not always obvious. They're sometimes counterintuitive, and you always have to be, sort of tuning. It's like you're the chief mechanic for a race team, right? You're trying to beat the competition. Everybody's out there finding new ways to tune their car. And even though you think you got it 100% tuned, if you're not beating the competition, then you got to find some more ways to tune it, right? Let's see. Yeah, a really, really key metric that in businesses I've been involved in, it's very rare to even have any consistent way to measure this. Probably in larger organizations where you have more of a, kind of a HR team, training team, et cetera. It's a little more common, but knowing how long it takes a rep to get ramped up and be productive is super important, right? If you think about it, it's no different than measuring the ROI on an advertising campaign. I'm going to spend $10,000 this month to get this many leads, which will turn into this many deals, which will turn into this much in sales, right? And what's the ROI between the investment in the ads and the income in sales? Same thing with a salesperson. I'm going to spend a lot of time and money finding and hiring and onboarding that salesperson. And it's going to take them weeks, months to pay all that back, right? If I can compress that time from, 6 months to 4, do the math in your own spreadsheet. It's huge. It allows you to scale your business tremendously faster, right? Because you're not waiting. Like there's only so many salespeople you can add to the team if they're all going to cost you money for 6 months. But if they all only cost you money for 4 months, you can add more. You can either, stagger them and add them more quickly over time, or you can just add more in the beginning because you're not investing as much time and money in them in the first place. So that's a huge one. Win rate by rep. We've kind of talked about that a few different ways already. Coaching impact. Again, this is a tough one because, it's up there at that level 4, like we talked about earlier. Being able to tie it all together and say, hey, this rep's win rate went up because we were able to coach him in these different ways, right? To tie that together. That's a challenge, right? But you have to look for the opportunity. You have to figure out a way to, it might be as simple as these sales reps are highly engaged in our training tools, and these other sales reps are not, because we've left it up to them, made it a little bit optional. And how do their results change over time? I think the other thing about the coaching part is, just like in a sports team, right? Baseball, football, whatever. There are some guys that have raw talent, and there are some guys that don't. But on the flip side, there are some guys and girls that are coachable, and there are some guys and girls that are not coachable, right? So to me, that's the thing you want to try and measure first, is when we're providing coaching, and training, are we seeing them change their behaviors, or at least try to change their behaviors in the real world? Or are they just going through the motions and sitting, using it as a way to take a Friday off? So the big shift in measurement from what happened to what do we do next? We've kind of talked about that. We want a dashboard that gives us the early warning signs that tells us how our engine is operating, right? Forecasting. A bad forecast is, based on, I got some deals in the pipeline and I have a few stages, and the further, if they're in stage 4, that's a lot better than stage 2, and we give it a higher percentage, and everything else is subjective, left up to the sales rep, right? You're just always going to be over forecasting in that kind of situation, but that's what most of us live with. A good forecast is using the buyer's engagement as a signal for where they are in the process. Deal health scores, do we have relationships? Have we built relationships with all the key influencers? Do we even know who the key influencers are? Execution quality indicators, are we doing things in the proper sequence and at the proper cadence? So the RevOps design framework. So you're starting with aligning the process to the buyer journey. I haven't really said a lot about that today. Our webinar 3 weeks ago was exactly about that, the difference between the buyer journey and the sales process. If you didn't get to see that, I highly recommend you go back and take a look at that. But that underlies everything that we're talking about today. As much as possible, if you can build your sales process around the buyer's process, that makes almost all of this stuff we're talking about today much, much easier, right? So the stages aren't cold calling and qualifying and appointment set and sending proposal and closing, because that's what you're doing, not what the buyer's doing, right? The stages are things like connecting, building relationship, identifying pain points, education, proposing solutions, things like that, right? Or learn. Yeah, it's hard as a salesperson. It's hard to even speak in the language of the buyer, but you really have to work at it, honestly, because we're salespeople. We're thinking about hitting our numbers, right? In my experience, this is one of the areas where it pays dividends to bring in an outside expert, even if it's just a friend with some experience in your industry, or a mentor or something like that, or more of a consultant or something, because they're just going to be able to be objective and see it from the buyer's perspective much, much better. When you have a fight with your spouse, right, it's almost impossible to see their point of view, right? That's what this is. You're in there, having a fight with your customers to get their purchase, right? It's hard to see things the way they see it, right? So aligning the process to the buyer journey, define the required signals, right? What are those little oil pressure indicators we're going to look for? Connecting all the systems together so that when I am not logging enough calls in the CRM, automatically somebody or some system is going, hey, Craig needs to take a look at this video about making more calls, right? Enabling managers to coach from the data, just like what I just said. It may be watch a video, or it may just be let my manager know he needs to walk down the hall and have a talk with me. And what about, right? Like what specifically, not just, hey, how's it going? How's your pipeline look? You know, let's get real specific. Help me. You know, don't be the owner of the team. Be the manager on the field that sees the way I'm standing when I'm swinging the bat and can tell me, hey, pick up your elbow a little bit. Now try it and watch how that works and give me a little, coach me. Deliver guidance in the workflow. Tell the sales rep, hey, do this. So where do we start? Forecasting, obviously important. Start doing your forecasts and layering on the signal data that you're starting to think you may want to keep your eyes on, right? Look at those deals and give them a grade based on the oil pressure and the water temperature and all of those other things. Things like, completion of profile, right? Like, have we asked them all of the questions we need to ask them? Do we know all of the decision makers? What's our engagement rate? Are we talking to these guys every day? Are we talking to them once a week, once a month? Are there some of them we're just not talking to? All of those things need to be part of sort of ranking your deals. You're going to have to do that for a little while to see which numbers are the ones that really drive performance, right? So my advice is don't wait around until you've come up with the perfect system, or don't go and, buy all new technology and wait for all of that to get set up and working right so that you can start this. Start doing it now with the data that you have, because you're going to see a lot just by looking. And it's down the road when you've done it a little bit and you've started to realize what numbers really seem to matter, then you'll know a lot more about how the tech stack needs to work for you. Where are deals stalling, right? Usually what that means is whatever happened in the deal in the stages before that, there wasn't enough qualification going on. We weren't being clear about budget and decision-making process and those kind of things. We know at that stage, whatever we're asking the customer to do next, they're not ready for. So we may need to break that stage they're stalling into 2 stages or more, but usually just 2 stages, where the first of those 2 is a sort of a education type of step, because what's usually happening is you've kind of hit them with, oh, wow, yeah, I see how we have a problem and maybe we could increase revenue if we did this, or we could cut costs if we did that. And you have some solutions that look pretty good. You've educated them about a problem or an opportunity and potential solutions. And now they're just kind of, whoa, okay, I got to do some analysis of this, and I need to go do some due diligence and look for other potential solutions. I'm not just going to buy from the first guy that walked in the front door, right? So you need to guide that process, know that it's happening, and be there to guide it. Rather than just immediately going, hey, are you ready for a proposal? Right? Yeah, and we've talked about rep ramp, right? How quick are those guys getting to where they're producing, producing profit? So an example, if you got late stage deal stall, your deals are getting close to closing, but then they stall. There's no clear risk signals visible. I didn't see that coming. Managers are relying on the rep updates. So whatever the rep tells me, that's what I'm telling my boss. So once you've crossed this Rubicon, as it were, you have defined exit criteria for each stage, like I've talked about here. Is that whole customer profile filled out? Do we know everything we need to know about the customer? If not, you don't get to go to the next stage, right? Risk alerts are triggered automatically, right? No contact with the customer in 2 weeks. Coaching aligned to deal signals, right? So complex deals, especially a lot of times it's very much about negotiation and deal structure. And those are skills that when you have somebody on your team that has that skill set and has a good experience with that, boy, they can be so valuable to the sales rep. But the sales rep has to be ready to hear it. So you can't just lock everybody in a room on Friday and say, hey, you're going to listen to Bob over here because he's our master negotiator. Because they're not ready to hear it. They don't need it right now. You've got to show up when you see that deal is looks like it might be real, but the customer is going to need it to be structured in a certain way. That's when you jump in and help that sales rep with that. Okay. Key takeaways for today. RevOps is not a reporting team, right? It's not just the people on your staff that run the reports and massage the data and keep all the tech working. Tools aren't going to fix this, not unless you're able to align the tools into some kind of consistent system, right? That's stable, doesn't break all the time, and consistent. Data's got to be the guide to your behavior. What we know about the world today tells us what we should do tomorrow, right? Not my gut feeling. Oh man, I just feel it, boss. This is going to be the one. You got to give me a little more than that. Why? Okay, so if you want to really dive into this, and for me, I've been in sales for a long time. I've worked with a lot of folks that run sales organizations, and I've kind of seen the good, bad, and the ugly. I feel like, not to pat myself on the back too much, but I feel like I know enough to be dangerous. At least if Mark was here, he might slap me and call me an idiot, but because he definitely has a lot more experience and knows more than I do. But even in spite of my, let's say, overconfidence, what I do know is that I don't always do it the best way possible, right? All of us need, that objective look from outside, because you just kind of don't see what you don't see. Mark put together a scorecard or assessment that you can do. I'm going to put the link. Let's see. I got to figure out how to get you guys oh man, lost my. Oh, here we go. Here's the landing page. I'm going to take the link and I'm going to put it in the chat of the meeting here. Definitely go and take that. It's super easy. It doesn't cost you anything. Take you less than 5 minutes. And it comes back and gives you a very detailed report on sort of where the low-hanging fruit might be for you and your team. And I did it, and it was very eye-opening. It kind of makes you realize, oh yeah, I kind of think I'm doing a decent job, but maybe I need to improve over here, right? So I put the link. I think it's in there. It seems like it's kind of not showing up or something. I'm going to put it in here again. You guys take advantage of that. And then also, I just wanted to give everybody a little glimpse. I know we're kind of running right at an hour here, so thank you for your patience. But the idea here is, here's my pipeline, right? And sure, as a sales rep, I can go into that opportunity and I can say, hey, you know what? They just told me that they're going to add on the so-and-so addition or whatever. So now that's a $30,000 deal. And, I'm going to move it to the qualification stage, right? Okay. Woohoo. That's great. But as we talked about before, the system should kind of check me, right? Yeah. Are you sure you're ready to go to that stage? Do we know what we need to know to go to that stage? And it should automate some things, right? If I'm at the qualification stage, maybe I need to send them some kind of questionnaire or something. Why don't the system just do that, right? So here's how that works in Sales Nexus. As I move through those stages, we can trigger, send an email, schedule a call, send a text message, do a webhook or an API call to integrate, share information with other systems or whatever that might be in your world. But that's how you can kind of create a system that automates things. And if you do that, back to what's really been underlying this whole conversation is helping the sales rep be successful, right? If you put these kind of automations in there so that the sales rep knows, hey, when I get off the phone with this customer, if I have, if everything goes great and I'm ready to go to the qualification stage, all I got to do is go in here and drag Amanda from stage 1 to stage 2, and all of the follow-up stuff that I need to do to really do a great job in the qualification stage just happens. I don't have to go and spend 15 minutes sending emails and doing stuff, right? That's a great encouragement for the sales rep to play ball with the system, right? And as anybody that's done this for any amount of time knows, that's 9/10 of the battle, right? Just getting the sales team to follow the system. The more you automate and the more you make it easy for them, the more they're going to play ball. Okay, well, we will send you guys a recording of today's webinar, and we'll include in that a link to this assessment if you didn't get it out of the chat. And we'll be doing it again in 3 weeks. So come back and join us. You'll get an invite for that. And hopefully Mark will be back on his feet and feeling good. And we'll take things a little bit deeper and start getting a little more practical into, okay, now we know what we want to do. Let's talk about how. Okay, well, I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you. And as I said, you'll be getting some follow-up from us here with the recording and the assessment. And if there's anything at all we can do to help, just feel free to reach out to me directly at cklein@salesnexus.com. Thank you, everybody. Y'all have a great rest of the day.